My parents abandoned me at 17. Now I'm rich, and they're back. The silence was the first thing that hit me. It wasn't the usual quiet of an empty house in the late afternoon. This was a profound, hollow silence, the kind that absorbs sound and leaves a ringing in your ears. I was 17, coming home from my after-school shift at the local library, my mind preoccupied with an upcoming calculus exam. I called out, "Mom? Dad? I'm home," but my voice was swallowed by the stillness. The air was stale, different. A prickle of unease traced its way up my spine. The shoe rack by the door, usually a chaotic jumble of my dad's work boots, my mom's sensible flats, and my brother Michael's perpetually muddy sneakers, was empty save for my own worn-out pair. The family photos were gone from the hallway table, leaving pale, dust-free rectangles on the dark wood. It was in the kitchen that I found it. A single sheet of notebook paper, torn hastily from a spiral, lay on the gleaming granite countertop. It was my mother's handwriting, a familiar, looping script that suddenly felt alien. The message wasn't a letter. It was a verdict, a dismissal of my entire existence in 4 chillingly casual words. "You'll figure it out." I read it again. And again. The words didn't make sense. Figure what out? Where were they? My mind, struggling to comprehend, raced through a Rolodex of possibilities. A family emergency? A surprise trip? But the empty closets, the bare walls, the stark, echoing silence told a different story. This wasn't a trip. This was an erasure. I sank onto a kitchen stool, the note trembling in my hand. A flood of memories, small, painful cuts I had long tried to ignore, washed over me. This wasn't a sudden act. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being useful, but never truly loved. I remembered my 13th birthday, the year I meticulously followed a recipe to bake my mom a chocolate cake from scratch. I'd presented it to her, my heart swelling with pride, only to watch her face pinch in distaste as she poked it with a fork. "It's a bit clumpy, isn't it, dear?" she'd said, before pushing the plate away. I remembered being 15, spending weeks tutoring Michael through his history finals, patiently explaining the same concepts over and over. He passed with AB, and I was ecstatic for him. His gratitude came in the form of calling me a know-it-all and slamming his bedroom door in my face. I remembered my 16th birthday, handing over my entire first paycheck from my part-time job to my dad. Bills were tight, he'd said. I was happy to help, to contribute, to finally be seen as a valuable part of the family. A month later, during an argument where he called me useless, I tearfully reminded him of my contribution. He'd stared at me, his eyes cold, and yelled, "Don't you dare throw that in my face. That was your duty." I was their tool, their tutor, their emergency fund. But I was never their daughter in the way that mattered. Now it was official. My parents and my brother, my entire world, had packed up their lives and moved 2 states away, leaving me behind like a piece of forgotten furniture. The landlord, a gruff man with a perpetually furrowed brow, confirmed it a week later when he showed up to do a final inspection. They'd broken the lease, he told me, and he needed me out by the end of the week. The bottom fell out of my world. I had nowhere to go. I spent the first 3 nights on a friend's couch, the next 2 on another's, each stay a painful exercise in accepting charity I couldn't repay. The pity in their parents' eyes was almost worse than the abandonment. I ran out of couches, ran out of favors, and found myself utterly, terrifyingly alone. With the last dregs of my savings, I rented a small, windowless storage unit. It became my home. I would sneak in late at night, a ghost in the deserted, fluorescent-lit corridors, and sleep on a pile of old blankets, the cold concrete seeping into my bones. My days were a carefully orchestrated routine of survival. I'd wake up before dawn, slip out of the storage facility, and walk to the local YMCA. I'd use a guest pass I found online to shower in the communal stalls, the hot water a fleeting, precious luxury. My meals consisted of a jar of peanut butter and a plastic spoon, eaten hunched over in a secluded corner of the public library. The library was my sanctuary, a place of warmth and free internet. I spent hours on their aging computers, applying for any job that didn't require a permanent address or a high school diploma. I learned to project an aura of normalcy, to smile at potential employers while my stomach gnawed with hunger, to pretend everything was fine. Finally, a lifeline. The manager of a 24-hour diner, a woman with a face like a roadmap of hard-won battles and a heart tougher than her grisly steaks, hired me for the night shift. She was gruff and unsentimental, but she was fair. She paid me in cash under the table until I could save enough to get a proper ID. She never asked questions about the dark circles under my eyes or why I sometimes fell asleep on my feet. Once, she found me napping in the break room, my head on a stack of napkins, and instead of firing me, she just draped a dirty apron over me like a blanket and let me sleep for an hour. That first year was a brutal, relentless climb out of an abyss. I scraped and saved, watching free YouTube tutorials on financial literacy and goal setting on my cheap, prepaid phone. I kept every receipt, tracked every penny. I was a survivor, fueled by a quiet, desperate rage to prove them wrong, to prove that I could, in fact, figure it out. The real turning point came in the form of a diner regular, a kind, middle-aged office manager who always ordered the same thing: black coffee and a slice of apple pie. One night, he noticed me studying a textbook during a lull. He asked what my plans were. I told him I was just trying to get by. The next day, he offered me a temporary job cleaning out and organizing his office's overflowing file room. The pay was triple what I made in a week at the diner. I said yes without a moment's hesitation. That temp job became my ladder. I was a quick study, meticulously organized, and pathologically reliable. I showed up early, stayed late, and asked intelligent questions. One job led to another, my reputation as a hyper-efficient freelancer spreading through word of mouth. By 22, I had left the diner behind and was freelancing full-time, a one-woman army of administrative support and organizational consulting. By 25, I took the leap. I launched my own consulting business. My headquarters was a folding table in the corner of my tiny studio apartment. My only asset was a borrowed laptop. But my drive was relentless. By 27, I had 5 contractors working under me, a small leased office space, and a client roster that included companies whose names I used to see on billboards and feel a million miles away from. And by the time I was 29, I looked at my banking app and saw a number with 7 figures. I was a millionaire. Not the flashy influencer kind, but the real, quiet, secure kind. I had a robust retirement account, 0 debt, a paid-off apartment in a city I loved, and health insurance that meant I never had to fear getting sick again. The first time I saw that number, I sat on the floor of my beautiful, empty apartment and cried until I had no tears left. Throughout those 12 years of struggle and success, I never heard from them. Not a call, not a letter, not even a guilty, anonymous email. Social media, however, has a way of dredging up ghosts. One night, my brother Michael's face popped up in my People You May Know feed. He was married, a smiling wife on his arm, a photo of a cherubic little girl as his profile picture. They still lived in the state they had fled to. I stared at his face, older now, lines of worry around his eyes, and a familiar ache bloomed in my chest. Did his wife know about me? Did he tell her he had a sister? Or was I just a secret, a ghost from a life he had helped erase? I often wondered if it would have been easier to simply hate them, to fuel my ambition with pure, unadulterated rage. But it was never hate that I felt. It was a deep, profound heartbreak, a wound that had scarred over, but never truly healed. I started going to therapy, not because I was broken, but because I was determined to stay whole. My therapist, Melissa, helped me unpack the years of trauma and build a new foundation of self-worth. She encouraged me to create a new family, a list of the people who had shown me kindness when they had no obligation to: the diner manager, the office manager who gave me my first break, coworkers who had become friends, strangers who had offered a smile on a day I wanted to disappear. They were my true family, the ones who had saved me. Last week, the carefully constructed piece of my life was shattered. A podcast I had reluctantly agreed to do, an interview about entrepreneurship and overcoming adversity, went viral. I had spoken, cautiously, about my past, about being a victim of family estrangement. The episode exploded, hitting 1 million views in 4 days. My inbox was a flood of support and gratitude from strangers who saw their own pain reflected in my story. And then, nestled among the messages of solidarity, was an email that made my blood run cold. The subject line read, "You're still our daughter." It was from my mother. The email was short, devoid of any real apology. It was a clinical, detached paragraph about how she had heard my side of the story and that perhaps we could talk. A few hours later, another email arrived. This one was from Michael. "We miss you," it read. "Can we fix this?" I stared at the screen, the words blurring, 12 years of silence broken not by remorse, but by my newfound success. I closed the laptop, my heart a frantic, trapped bird in my chest. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the same silence that had greeted me all those years ago, and wondered, does healing mean forgetting the past, or does it mean finally forcing it to look you in the eye? The emails were like ghosts at a feast, their presence casting a long, cold shadow over the life I had so painstakingly built. I let them sit in my inbox, unanswered, for 10 days. On the advice of my therapist, Melissa, I gave myself space to feel the chaotic storm of emotions they had churned up, the sharp, familiar sting of old wounds, a surge of white-hot anger, and beneath it all, a treacherous, stupid flicker of hope. I finally decided to reply to Michael first. My message was curt, a single question that held the weight of 12 years of silence. "It's been 12 years," I wrote. "What changed?" His response was swift. He claimed the podcast had been a revelation, that he'd been too young and scared to defy our parents when they left, that he'd always wondered about me. He even said he was proud of my success. I didn't buy it. "If you were so concerned," I typed back, "why wait until I was a millionaire to reach out?" His next email was a novel of excuses and, finally, the truth. Their family business had failed. His wife, Jenny, was pregnant with their second child. Medical bills were burying them. There it was. Not remorse. Desperation. My mother followed up with a volley of old family photos, me as a gap-toothed 5-year-old at the beach, Michael and I building a lopsided snowman. It was a transparent, clumsy attempt at emotional manipulation. "We made mistakes," she wrote. "We want to make amends." I decided to meet Michael, and only Michael, in a neutral city halfway between us. Walking into that coffee shop and seeing him, older, heavier, a stranger with my brother's eyes, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. He launched into a practiced, tearful apology, painting himself as a child victim of our parents' decisions. But when I pressed him, when I asked him why they had left me, the truth he offered was so absurd it was almost comical. "They always saw you as the strong one," he said, his eyes downcast. "The one who would be fine." They had convinced themselves, he claimed, that they were doing me a favor. I told him about the storage unit, about the peanut butter, about the crushing, soul-deep loneliness. His face crumpled, but his story was riddled with holes. He claimed they told him I had a plan, that I was living with a friend's family. All lies. I left that meeting feeling nothing but a cold, empty certainty. He was sorry, yes, but he was sorry for himself. That night, my mother called, her voice a syrupy, tearful performance of pride and regret. Her reason for abandoning me was different, but no less self-serving. "We were in debt, Emma," she cried. "We couldn't afford you. We thought social services would place you with a better family." I hung up and threw my phone across my hotel room. The next morning, an email from my dad arrived.
"No apology. No pretense."
Just a laundry list of their financial woes, culminating in a blunt, shameless request for money. I forwarded it to Melissa with the subject line. And there it is. My decision was made. I emailed Michael, offering a relationship with him and his family, but with an ironclad boundary: no money and no contact with our parents until they took full, unequivocal responsibility. His disappointed reply confirmed my suspicions. My success was not a source of pride for them, it was a resource they felt entitled to. The harassment began in earnest then. My parents showed up at my apartment building, pounding on my door, leaving threatening voicemails. My mother staged a fake medical emergency in my lobby, a desperate, theatrical ploy to force a confrontation. Michael, caught in the middle, vacillated between pleading and guilt-tripping. It was a full-scale siege, an attempt to break down the boundaries I had just begun to build. The true turning point came not from them, but from Jenny, Michael's wife. She appeared at my door one afternoon, her young daughter asleep on her shoulder, her eyes filled with a weary shame. She told me the truth I had only suspected. My parents had spent the last 12 years crafting a meticulous narrative of my abandonment, painting me as a troubled, runaway teen who had stolen from them and broken their hearts. They were the victims, I was the villain. Jenny had believed it, until my podcast shattered the illusion. Horrified, she had confronted Michael, then my parents, who had finally admitted the truth when she threatened to expose them. Her visit was a gift, a confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that the gaslighting was real. But it also unleashed my parents' fury. The threats escalated. They broke into Michael and Jenny's house, stealing personal items and leaving a menacing note. They began stalking my apartment, their car a constant, menacing presence across the street. We filed for restraining orders, a legal fortress against their escalating desperation. The court hearing was a surreal drama. They stood before the judge, weaving a tale of a misunderstood family, while Marcus, my lawyer, calmly presented the evidence of their harassment: the threatening texts, the break-in, the stalking. The judge, a woman with eyes that missed nothing, saw through their performance and granted the restraining orders. 3 years of no contact. Any violation would mean immediate arrest. As we left the courthouse, my mother called my name, her voice small and defeated. I didn't look back. That night, a text from an unknown number arrived. It was a photo of my niece, Lily, playing in a friend's backyard, taken from a distance. The message was 4 words: "This isn't over yet." The terror was immediate and suffocating. This wasn't just about me anymore. They were threatening a child. The final confrontation was on my terms. I emailed them, a single, cold invitation to meet at a public coffee shop. After that, I wrote, "You leave us all alone forever." I sat across from them, these 2 people who had created me and then discarded me, and I laid out my terms. I showed them the evidence I had collected, the proof of their threats and lies. I told them that if they ever contacted any of us again, I would not just call the police. I would systematically dismantle their lives, sharing the truth with every person in their orbit. I had the resources, and I had the will. My father blustered, my mother cried, but for the first time, I felt nothing. Not hatred, not love, just a profound, liberating indifference. "I don't hate you," I told them as I walked away. "I feel nothing for you. You're strangers to me now. And that is your loss, not mine." 6 months later, a letter arrived, forwarded by my lawyer. It was from my mother. It wasn't an excuse, it was an acknowledgement. They were in counseling. They would respect the boundaries. They hoped, one day, for a chance to apologize, but they understood if that day never came. I keep the letter, not as a promise of reconciliation, but as a receipt. A proof of purchase for my own freedom. My family now is my brother and Jenny and my sweet niece, Lily. It's a family forged in the wreckage of our shared trauma, built on a foundation of chosen love, not broken obligation. Last week, at Lily's 4th birthday party, held in my apartment, a space once defined by loneliness and now filled with laughter, I watched Michael swing his daughter in joyful circles, and I finally understood. They told me I would figure it out. And I did. I figured out that family isn't about the blood you share. It's about the people who show up, the people who stay, the people who love you not for what you can do for them, but for who you are.